here with Marco Saccaggi from CL. You're the responsible for the Southeast region of Communion and Liberation. And I just want to talk to you about some themes of the group or the movement, CL we call it, and maybe some insights of what is CL and insights into the founder. So let's talk about that first. What is CL?
Okay. What is CL? Is a friendship, okay? Mm-hmm. If we want to define it in very simple terms, a friendship that has the aim of understanding and living the faith in community and going to the basics of Christianity. Mm-hmm. The fact that the faith is first of all an encounter. And this encounter moves everything in the person and brings naturally people together in community. And living in community, you discover the origin of the diversity that you found in the people. And the origin is Christ. And getting to learn Christ and continuing to live in the community that in some way follows us through the different stages of our experience. I met CL in high school when I was young, many years ago, and then it continued as a beautiful experience in college, which is usually where you lose your faith. Mm-hmm. For us was exactly the opposite. The experience of college was extraordinary, positive and appealing, and I can talk regarding that if you want to know more. But then when we got married, we started to live in a group of fraternity of CL, educating our kids, taking decisions regarding where to live, how to work, and continues to develop and going deeper in our faith in a group of families.
And you're from Milan?
I am from Milano, yeah. We moved to US in 2000, initially in the Midwest in Dayton, Ohio, and then I moved to Atlanta in 2010.
Okay. And when you got married and lived in community, what does that mean, like to live in community? You're not...
Yeah, it's clearly not that we're living together. Everybody lived in his own place, apartment in a big city of Milan. But we got together regularly, meaning at least every couple of weeks, studying the text of Father Giussani. We met together and discussed and shared our experiences, our questions. But the life together, for example, vacationing together, going in Italy, we have long vacations, 2 or 3 weeks at a time. So we went to the mountains or to the seaside and spent together time, free time together, praying together, continuing to discuss, staying with our kids, visiting places. But in this idea that the unity of life, the fact that the faith touches everything, every aspect, not only your religious sphere. It touches the way you look at work, the way you are challenged in the family with the education of the kids, and requires a companionship that is helping you to look at everything. And also the recognition that, I am still new to the faith, is a process that is ongoing. And if you do not nurture it, you lose it. So faith needs to continuously be developed and understood. And we need to continue to compare the proposal of the faith to the challenges of life so that the judgment becomes more clear and more appealing. And you understand that the hypothesis of the faith is the most human and the most comprehensive. So you say, I get another confirmation. So let's tackle the next problem, etc.
And some people have the secular culture. They see the challenges to the faith. They experience that, and their solution is kind of to withdraw or to get into a bunker, so to speak. CL gives me the impression of you all like to find the good or to find Christ in like modernity, right? And the things that try to find the good.
Yeah, one example of that is this New York encounter that we organize every year in New York, where we meet people of every religion, every political direction. We can think of with an intense dialogue in which we think that clarity regarding where you start from, but this desire to encounter everybody opens friendships, even if from different positions that stay different, but in some way are reconciled in the friendship that is created, in the dialogue that is created. Father Giussani always invited us to judge everything, okay? Not to, because again, the faith needs to be confirmed in its judgment in front of everything. It can't stay like the set of beliefs that we have and the problem is resolved. No. What do you say in front of Ukraine? What does it say in front of, the transgender in women's sports, etc. Is inviting us. I remember Father Giussani taught in Catholic University, and all the students that were in the community with him were constantly challenged by him. Okay, what do you say now in front of this event that is happening in society? He was challenging them and helping them to develop a judgment on that could be then offered to everybody and corrected, because sometimes you make mistakes when you try, the first time to look at things.
I know as a priest, I get the question a lot. I wonder how to navigate it myself at times. Like we have a media-drenched culture, and how do we enjoy media? Like, Father, can I go see this movie? It seemed like Giussani, I've seen like a documentary on him, and I thought the movement would, like you could see maybe the young people singing like secular songs or popular music, and maybe finding ones with some good themes. But to me, that seems to be a hard balance of enjoying, or I don't know, enjoying is not a strong enough word, but being in the culture and doing cultural things. But is it misleading me? Is it guiding me down the wrong path? Is it leading me to the gospel? That seems like hard navigation, isn't it?
It's not an easy navigation, but I think there are glimmers of truth everywhere. So the challenge is to find them and not to quench them, not to kill them, but to value them and to, not everything is good. I totally agree with you. But there is some good here and there. And that's the point of encounter. Also, the point of encounter is the fact that Don Giussani told us many times, the heart of the man is the same. So if we can start from what is in the heart of man, the desire for happiness, the desire for justice, for truth is in everybody, in every man. That's the starting point where we can find. Then, of course, the answers could be different, and the culture could be different, and the histories could be different. But at that point, there is a good starting point. For example, he was a great friend of the monks in Japan. They are Shintoists, okay, not even Christians. And they were his great friends, and they even came from Japan for his funeral, because we shared with them the idea of the harmony of nature. And they were so struck by the fact, that the beauty of the blade of grass that found in Father Giussani the same kind of interest. And Giussani said that I couldn't, when I met them for the second or third time, not to tell them, you see, this harmony that you cherish in nature became flesh and was a man walking among us. Okay.
He did tell them
He
that?
He did tell them. And that made them even more friends of him, because they were not Christians. So, but they understood, where he was coming from and the common path that they had and the great esteem for each other, because, stories are different. But that's the basis for the friendship, this awe in front of nature. And then Father Giussani was in some way inviting them to take it to the next steps. But, sometimes, it takes a long time to take the step, and the histories are different and so on. But you see, this allows to really to talk with everybody. If the starting point is humanity and the desires that are in the heart of man.
Yeah, that hit me about like some of like the radical feminism we have in this country, and even some of the social movements that, you know, like Black Lives Matter, you know, we had some violence occurring and things like that, but yet it was helpful to recognize the good desires of people, maybe wanting justice, or hey, there's a problem here, or you know, they're suffering, or and wanting some kind of solutions. I like with like feminism, the radical feminists, you know, they have a concern for women and family, you know, and some of their solutions are, you know, anti the gospel values. But yeah, I think it's good to say, well, hey, they try to seek something better, something good. Sometimes their means are bad, you know. But yeah, I think that's a great point, that we can recognize that as a starting point. But what? How about the role of beauty? What would Giussani say? The importance of beauty. That seems to be a sweet spot for
wow.
her.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I tell you, staying with him, spiritual exercises or other events, he was extremely interested in seeing things done with beauty. For example, the singing had to be perfect. Okay, and I remember a couple of times when we were starting to pray and we sing the hymn of the morning prayers, him stopping us, saying, "You're not singing it in the right way.
Right.
Okay, you are distracted. I can hear in your voice that you are
Right.
not focused," and teaching us how to stay focused and approach and sing, where to breathe. So he wanted to see the face of the eternal in that contingent
Right.
event that was happening in front of his eyes. Okay, or the way we distributed communion. When we have spiritual exercises for 24,000 people, you have to distribute communion in 10 minutes to 24,000 people. How do you do it? It was not a detail. It's something that we discussed with him. Where are we going to put the people, the number of priests? How are we going to take the priest to the different points? He wanted the gesture to have a beauty in itself.
All right.
The beauty of the order, of
Right.
you know, taking care of all the details. So, yeah, other things that I remember, especially spiritual exercises. You know, it could be, you know, a lot of content, words, things, but usually done during the weekend. But on Saturday afternoon, it was always either classical music or him presenting a piece of literature or watching a movie together, but was always the proposal of an event of beauty, of something beautiful moving the heart of man, because there is nothing that moves the heart like beauty. And the last thing that I remember is the vacations, you know, going on vacations and the beauty of nature and stay in front of the beauty of nature. For example, when we were hiking, 1,000 people in silence going to the peak. Imagine to see 1,000 people not talking and looking around, because if you are not open to the beauty, you don't see it.
Right.
So that was the invitation to open your eyes, don't talk, look around you, and be struck by the beauty that you see.
Right.
And that in itself was, you know, an incredible experience.
And he was from northern Italy?
Yes, this was from a village right outside Milan.
Oh, okay. And some of these themes seem so Italian, you know, like friendship, kind of gregarious people, warm people. You have the beauty of northern Italy with mountains and things. So that played a significant role in CL.
Yeah, I think so. Imagine also all the culture that we have in Italy related to Christianity, all the churches, the music. Father Giussani loved music a lot, and
Classical music was his
lot
favorite?
of classical music, and he used a lot of pieces of classical music to illustrate. For example, in his book, that is the Religious Sense, that is his first book of this trilogy. in order to illustrate the fact that the heart of man has the desire, unquenchable desire for happiness. He was making us listen to one of the prelude of Chopin called The Drop. That is a beautiful piece of music in which he was saying there is a beautiful melody in the foreground. And he understood after listening to this piece many times that the real theme of the music was not the beautiful melody, but was this note in the background that keeps on hammering from the beginning to the end. And he said the theme of the music, what attracts in life is not the beauty of the things that happen, but the heart of man that beats behind that from the beginning to the end, and then describe different passages. But, for us young students, in front of this proposal was really having eyes wide open and say, oh my, that's true, and even surprising in music, these concepts, was really moving.
What piece was that? Chopin?
I have to find, it's one of the preludes, opus 28. Oh, wow. I have to send you, but it's called The Drop. If you Google it, I think you will find
Drop,
it.
D-R-O?
Yeah, The Drop, okay. Because it's like a drop of rain that hammers,
okay.
From the beginning to the end.
And like this constant note, or the desire of the heart that, sometimes, people in life, we struggle with things. Maybe we're wounded or have some hurt or something, and we're trying to heal that. And it seems like we discover things, and maybe it drives us to find a solution or this experience that can help us. Like, suppose we're lonely a lot as a child, right? So now we seek friendship, and we cultivate that as does that have a big role, like the cross and suffering and our sensitivity to beauty or to communion? And
yeah, I think so, meaning that I discover in myself this unquenchable desire, that even encountering an answer in Jesus gets satisfied, but the effect of that one is not to resolve the problem, but open even wider the angle of the desire. Okay, so this is the dynamic. And by the way, if you reference the Divine Comedy of Dante Alighieri, you will find exactly the same concept. When Dante talks regarding the encounter with God, is talking regarding a thirst that is quenched and at the same time is even bigger. So for me, the problem of happiness is not a problem resolved and finished. It's the problem that is continuously, because my heart wants continuous confirmation, continuous satisfaction. And, it's not enough to say, okay, I found it, problem solved.
Right.
It's endless, it will continue until the end. And hopefully in paradise will be a constant experience of satisfaction.
Right.
It's a dynamic, it's not a static, okay, problem solved and finished.
And this desire is not, what are the role of the emotions? And it seems like sometimes a solution could be kind of an emotional thing, but we're talking about something deeper. Like I hear a piece of music maybe that moves me emotionally.
Okay. Emotions are important because emotions are triggering the movement, okay? Because without emotion, we will be dead, okay? So we will see a beautiful thing without emotion, we will not be even pushed towards the beauty. We will be neutral, not moving. So emotions are important. The problem is that emotions can't be the end of it. At a certain point, reason has to kick in, okay? And I laugh because, again, I quote Dante in the Vita Nova, and Dante in the Vita Nova describes love for Beatrice at a certain point. He said, love never was in my heart as an emotion without the good advice of reason. Okay, so for me, emotion, if we stay at the level of emotions go away. And the second time is a little worse because there is not the newness of the first time. Right. With reason, it's just the opposite. Okay, because the more you you get into a truth, the deeper you go, the more you get out of it. So it's an endless journey. So emotions are good to start, but they are not carrying along very far. You need reason. And for Giussani, he really appealed to our reason a lot. Okay, and if you read one of his books, The Risk of Education, he tells the story of his first hour in high school when he got into a class and a student from the back raised his hand. And he said, he thought, oh my goodness, I'm not even starting and there is already an objection. And in reality, there was an objection. And the student said, Father, it's useless that you come here, to talk to us, because we perfectly know that faith and reason have no point of contact. So you're coming from faith, you're wasting your time. Giussani was really, okay. But being pretty quick and smart, immediately reacted saying, okay, what is reason? And the student was not able to answer. And the class was laughing, say, what is faith? And no answer. So he said, hey, friends, if you are not able even to define the terms of the problem. And he said, I thought that the problem was the teacher of philosophy that was behind all this. So it happened that at the end of the hour, and in Italy, the students stay in the class and the professor go back and forth, the philosophy professor was coming in. And so Father Giussani took the opportunity to say, dear professor, I complain, your students are using terms that they are not knowing the meaning of. And of course, the philosophy teacher got immediately reactive and started. But Giussani had to go to the next class and say, listen, for the students, let me ask you a question. Professor, let me ask you a question. Listen, I've never been to United States, but I can reasonably affirm that United States exists. Do you think this is reasonable or not? And the philosophy teacher thought for a second and said, no. And then he turned to the class and said, listen, it's not a problem of faith that I'm a priest or not. It's a fundamental difference in the way we think about reason. Okay, for this professor, it's unreasonable to think that United States exists. For me, it's perfectly reasonable because this is the method of faith. Okay, so it's not a problem of religion or not. It's a problem of the idea of reason. If reason is a mechanism, no. If reason is this openness that allows you to know things, it's a different story. So he appealed to us on the idea and to use our reason, because reason takes us to the threshold where faith then can take over.
Go farther.
And he develops a lot of this thinking in another book that's very interesting on faith. Is it possible to live this way? Is the title of the book. It's a dialogue with young people. And it talks regarding faith as a method of knowledge, and it's beautiful. I found it extremely interesting.
And you were telling me earlier that you knew Father Giussani's spiritual director.
Yes. It was a Franciscan friar, Father Emmanuel Braghini, and he lived a couple of blocks away from my house where I lived in Milan, and was the confessor of Father Giussani. And they were great friends and very often together. By the way, Father Emmanuel came to every spiritual exercises of high school students or university students. He celebrated Mass for the movement of CL every Sunday for years in Milan. And was an extraordinary person. I still remember some of his homilies and the points that he made. He was a great friend, and the friendship with Father Giussani started when Father Giussani went looking for a confessor. One day they were both young priests, and Father Emmanuel just been ordained as well. And that's the way they got to meet each other. They met again at the bus stop, and they realized that he was the priest that he had just confessed a few minutes before. And from that point, they never left each other.
And Father Giussani was a diocesan priest?
Yes.
Okay.
Initially, after being ordained, he taught at the seminary in Venegono, the major seminary of the city of Milan. He was very qualified, very intelligent, so they wanted him as a teacher. Then it happened that one day he was on a train going to Genova with some students by chance, and started to talk with them, and realized that, we were talking regarding the 50s, the end of the 50s, that even if the society was Catholic and 90% of the people went to church, the mentality of the young generations was not knowing the truth of the faith, but not even considering them. So the mentality of the young people had already moved on to something else. And he was really moved by that. So he went back to the seminary and to his director and said, listen, I would like to go and teach in high school, because this is where the mentality of the people is forming. And I want to be there, when that happens. And they said, okay, you can go. And they started to teach at the Berchet High School in Milan.
I had someone tell me one time, he was actually an American, he was a student at one of the Catholic universities, schools in Rome, and he said he didn't get his degree because he was hanging out in coffee shops all the time, but he got to know the Italian young people, and he said he found them to be very inquisitive about the faith, but what they didn't like was that how the faith was tied to the secular culture for so long in Italy, and they wanted something better, like in government and politics, whatever, but they saw that the church, I guess historically and stuff, was so tied that to reject the current system also necessitated rejecting the faith. Do you think is that what you see somewhat, or?
Yeah, but that model, I perfectly understand, the majority party was Christian Democrats, was the name of the party, with a very strong tie with the Conference of Bishops and so on. So it was politically immediately associated with the church. But that model went in crisis in the 90s with the fragmentations, the Christian Democrat lost their majority. I mean, there were a lot of political events that from one side caused the fragmentation of the big parties in smaller parties, and from the other, the point really brought to a completion a sort of process of disintegration and separation of the Christian Democrats from the church itself. So it's a secularization of that party that in a certain sense made things a little easier, because separated finally the party from the image of the church, making it a little easier, to choose for the church and not having to associate that with a particular political party. But I understand the concern that it was definitely, at least in the 80s and the 90s, a very common problem.
Well, maybe he meant it too, just like in terms of like Italy with so much history and architecture, and you got buildings that are hundreds of years old and beautiful art that you can't change it, right? It's works of art or something. And like the young people were wanting something new, and they just saw they had to reject all this past for the new.
Probably, yeah. Definitely.
I think it's interesting you said that Giussani wanted to teach them the contents of the faith. It almost, because to me, Giussani always seems like he's kind of embracing the new, and it seems to me, I read some of his things, and it's like it just seems complicated. It doesn't seem like a content-driven approach. I'm like jumping to like a catechetical approach,
Yeah, it's definitely not catechetical in the sense of because the problem is that people do not listen any longer. Words do not seem to move anybody. Not even the perfect thinking syllogism is moving anybody.
Right.
And that was happening when I was a young, adult at that time. What moves people is to meet something interesting, okay? To meet something different in which you perceive a difference, a different humanity, a different way of people that are staying together in a different way, that are doing things that you think are very boring in an interesting way. So the problem of the immediate visibility of the community and the presence in the environment was always to the forefront. Giussani, I think, as soon as he started to teach in high school, in Italy, there is usually a recess in the middle of the day, 20 minutes, people go and buy something to eat and they chit-chat, Giussani was a group of people say, who are those? Oh, those are the socialists. They are discussing regarding their plans. Okay, what is the other group over there? Oh, those are the communists that are discussing. And he said, where are the Christians? The Christians? Why should we have Christians? Everybody was Christian. Okay. He said, oh, the Christian, what do they say about, the new legislation? What do they say? So he started to gather around him kids that were interested to discuss it, but with the objective of making that present visible, okay, in the school, okay? Because if the faith is a total approach to life, it must be visible. It can't be hidden behind the common mentality of the culture. This aspect of understanding what is different, why it is different, and that this get understood in a companionship with others and putting us together, to understand that together has always been a concern.
And so that's like we look at the modern problems, I think you see a lot of people comment on the isolation that takes place in America, especially like consumerism, and our entertainment can be very specialized. I get in my little ghetto, so to speak, and I used to say, like in America in the 70s, we're all watching the same thing on television, right? We're no longer doing that. We don't even share like entertainment together. But it seemed like, right, I think what you've mentioned, like the CL approach, is to build community. That's an answer to many problems today, correct?
Yeah, I think so, because one of the things that I see that people are alone, at every age, every group. People that are not conceiving themselves as part of a community. And this has made humanity very poor, very limited, very focused on their own little things. Going back to live a real experience of community is not only enriching for the human being, but opening to all the problems of the world. And, for us, the experience of the community has always been a push towards encountering everybody, being present wherever we are. For example, I traveled a lot. I was a consultant. Everywhere I went in Europe, I went looking for communities of CL and meeting a lot of people, a lot of new people that I never met before. But this desire of wherever you go, have around you an experience that helps you to continue to grow in your faith, even for a couple of hours or for a dinner, but not, okay, I go abroad, I go and visit a museum is my thing. No, it's this desire that what you have seen as good, you can find everywhere. When we came to United States in Dayton, Ohio, the closest community was in Chicago. And after a few days we had arrived, there was a vacation in Minnesota. I threw the kids in the car and I drove 17 hours to go and stay.
That's American.
Yeah, it was a discovery of the distances, but it was not because you wanted to find again what constitutes you, what is at the root of yourself. You want to see Christ in the faces of your friends, even friends that you do not know, and you're willing to do a sacrifice and to drive 17 hours just to stay a week with these new people that are now my friends that I see.
And the
every time.
and the mechanics of the meeting would be to talk about like experiences in life and bringing Christianity to engage that or reflect upon
Yeah,
that.
at the center of the work that we do is what we call School of Community, which is a weekly meeting on mostly on texts of Father Giussani, so that we continue to compare our experience with a judgment, with a text that in some way allow us to go deeper and deeper in the content of the faith. We meet every week sharing our experiences, our questions, our difficulties. And in doing that, clearly we start to share life, the problems comes out, this person has a problem with his mother, so how can we help? And how can we, so that is what triggers then the broader life of the community. But School of Community is this essential help to change the mentality, because it's not a problem of beliefs. It's a problem of continuously testing our faith in front of the events of life and finding it, relevant and the best answer. In this way, you walk, you continue to go deeper, and doing this with your friends.
I thought, and I know Pope Benedict really admired Giussani. He preached at his funeral, I think, and it seemed like he was really skilled at talking about the current problems we're facing today and solutions and analyzing them. It seemed like he did that method in his teaching and preaching very much. That he was a genius. Do you have other people like you like to read or hear what they're saying about maybe the problems we're encountering in modernity?
Yeah, not a lot. I'm not a very cultured person in this sense. I read a lot of Benedict XVI, the books, but I don't have a specific other. I understand there is such a huge offer. I read a lot the classic, like for me, C.S. Lewis and Chesterton. Chesterton is one of my favorites that I go back and reread, because I think that the perspective of Chesterton is so close to the experience of the movement. For example, one text that I would recommend that I go back and reread is Men Alive, is one of the novels. Probably not one of the most famous of Chesterton, but that one brings the perspective of this man, Innocent Smith, that is accused of terrible crimes that reveal themselves to be his attempt to have a new gaze on reality. Okay, so he gets in his house from the chimney and is confused as a burglar because he wanted to have a different perspective of the table with his family sitting there, because he didn't accept the fact that that he was taking for granted their existence and their presence. That reflect exactly the spirit of the movement in a certain sense, the rediscovery of things that are under our eyes that perhaps we have neglected or we are taking for granted in their true value. Right. And this is fascinating, because it is continuous rediscovery of very simple things that are, at the root of our beliefs and a root of our awe in front of reality. Right. Because, God talks to us through facts, through the reality that happens in front of our eyes. It's not in the clouds. It's at the root of the reality that unfolds in front of our eyes. And we need to be educated to recognize him in the reality as it unfolds.
And it seems to me like I was trying to mention before that our suffering with things seem like it opens us up to that Christ vision, or maybe the solution of the cross and that reality, or something that kind of wakes us up to makes us open to God. I think that's been kind of my experience. That, well, like I think of like Lord of the Rings, that at the end, where Frodo he fails to, and Gollum in mercy he was allowed to live. This wicked creature, right? He bites off his finger. It was very, it wasn't Frodo's freedom. It's like Gollum bites off his finger. and the finger winds up in the volcano, right? And to me, is like such a powerful image of God's providence, His grace moving, that I need God's grace. I don't have the strength myself. And
Absolutely.
and my personal experience of that in my faith journey makes me appreciate the beauty of Tolkien's theme. All of a sudden that's powerful because I've suffered with that I don't know if it's necessary, but it just seems like in my life, it seems like suffering kind of gives me a sensitivity or an openness to finding Christ or something that.
No, I agree. It's a great point. We suffered a lot. Our daughter, Chiara, lost two babies. They were born alive. One died immediately. The other one after 9 days. Was definitely, and we were there living the whole experience with her and her husband. Was an experience of suffering, but an experience that opened us to one fundamental thing, is the fact that we depend totally from Him. But we depend not as we are dependent and so connected. So it was a period of suffering, but a period of really constant begging for His presence, to be there and recognizing His presence there. So it was not an unhappy period. Mm-hmm. It was a period in which you recognize this fundamental truth as so true that can carry on in front of the difficulty. Mm-hmm. And at the end, you find yourself richer in terms of a human experience, closer to my daughter and her husband, and more convinced that, we are really made by another. And so in this sense, I think I agree totally with you. Suffering opens to this fundamental dependency that is usually neglected because we are proud and we will say, no, okay, I get it. Let me do it. I do it. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Stay there. Right. I don't need you because I can now fix the problem. I understand how to do it. While in reality, the problem of life is constantly go back to this fundamental dependency, beg for His presence, and walk in life recognizing the signs of His presence. Right. And when we find it, we are very happy.
Right. And Giussani himself, his degrees, what were they in? It was systematic or moral or?
Yeah, in Catholic University, he taught moral theology. Okay. But he wrote different books. He came to the United States and wrote a very interesting book on the Protestants in US. So he examined the different positions and different proposals, and so he spent 6 months here and wrote this interesting book. He definitely neglected his career in college as a professor because he was dedicating 100% of his time to the life of the movement and staying with the students and living and developing the experience as it was unfolding in the events.
Did he have things he admired about American Protestantism? Or?
I don't know, sincerely. I remember that he had a particular interest, love for United States, for a lot of the values represented, the value of freedom. And he really wanted to see the movement present in United States. And he asked for the help of Monsignor Albacete, that died a few years ago. And Monsignor Albacete was the face of communal liberation in the United States for many years, an extraordinary character. And a great friendship he had with Father Giussani. And, but he really had a great esteem for this country.
Right. And just close with this. We were talking at lunch about Christians are having to confront the transgender movement, and I thought you had an interesting insight about, it seems like big tech is pushing some of these very liberal social causes, including transgenderism. And what was your take on that? Why they're...
Yeah, my impression is that, we are at a point where the trust in technology and man's ability to redefine everything is touching a point of an apex, So where nothing exists with a predefined purpose. Everything can be redefined. Sexuality is man or women, okay? If we have enough money and enough technology, we can transform anything in anything that we want. Refusing completely the fact that there is a given at the beginning that characterizes and makes us different or something different. No, if you have enough technology, you can resolve even the problem of death, you become I do not know, a different kind of entity that survives, forever in the network.
Right.
Okay, interesting thought.
Yeah. You know what I find interesting too is that your background's computer science and data analysis and things, and it just seems like communion and friendship and gathering together. Usually, the engineering world and everything, they're not as good as the socialization of communion. I have an engineering background too, but anyway, I think it's fascinating. You're being drawn to it.
Yeah, maybe because as I was telling you at the beginning, the experience of community in college for me was extraordinary. Okay, and I always mention the fact that we were a community of 600 students in my school, and we used to say the hour in the middle of the day before going to our classes, and imagine 400 students in a room, praying together before going to their classes. This gives, in a certain sense, the image of how intense the experience was. We had a bookstore because we started to publish books because we saw the need of collecting notes because there were not the good books available at the moment, or we were doing charitable work in very large groups in outskirts of the city. I was a representative of the students in one of the body of the college, and it was a normal thing for us to be present in the institutions, wherever it was necessary. So a very intense experience. So my love for developing software, all the rest, was not disconnected by all these other events that helped me to put in perspective what I was studying as part of, a much broader process of growth of the person. Because the person doesn't grow simply studying, but making experience of the one that I mentioned that make you understand what life is, so that you can face any problem, even the technical problems, with this wealth of understanding of the totality of reality, not only a small aspect.
Right. Well, thank you, Marco, so much for talking. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.